I'm just going to make mention about the foundations of Western religion.
Well, maybe we can do that on part, the next show. We can.
Well, let's go on with this since we've already introduced the idea of Western religion. Of course, we know that the Western religion is based on a far older Bible, the Bible of the Old Testament. Even further back, if you'll go back into the most ancient history of the world, in the Middle East especially, you will see, as we will show you now, the volcano was one of the many things that were worshipped in the ancient world. The volcano was very important because it represented life and creation, and it had a sexual connotation.
Wow.
That's why today in most men's rooms and hotels and restaurants there will always be a triangle on the door. Triangle being the pyramid. Pyramid comes from the word pyra, meaning fire, and mid, meaning middle.
Right.
The fire of sexual generation is in the middle of the human body. That's why the volcano always represented sex, the coming of life and the fire of life that brings new life to the world. So the volcano was a very important symbol to the ancient people. We'll go to the next slide and we will see how, now here is the encyclopedia discussion of, and let's go to, we'll see it says the volcano, like any other impressive or fearful aspect of nature, volcano have become the objects of worship for human beings from the earliest Stone Age. Yet the original Yahweh, which is one of the gods of the Old Testament, the original Yahweh seems to have begun as a volcano god also. Mount Sinai, where Moses encountered him, as was the seat of the Midianite god, and in the Midianites' earliest homeland, he was identified with the local moon god Sin, which is where we get the name for the mountain in the Middle East, Sinai, or Sinai. Comes from the old moon god Sin, after whom the mountain was named. The appearance of Yahweh, as I said, Yahweh is one of the ancient gods of the Old Testament, and the reference work says the appearance of Yahweh as a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. So that's the way the Old Testament God Yahweh appeared. And that was found in Exodus 13, 21 and 22. Now the word volcano, and this is important now, the word volcano, and let's go back to it, here it is. The word volcano comes from the Latin volcano god Vulcan, or Vulcanus, derived from the old Cretan deity Vulcanus. I want to repeat that, this is the most important, that the word, let's go back to the slide because I want to show that the word volcano comes from the Latin volcano god Vulcan. Okay, let's take the next slide. Now we're talking about the old volcano god. Let's go to the next one. Now here we have the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. We see the Israelites in the desert, and there's their God representation. And we'll go to the next slide now and see that in the middle, here's a reference work on Job 38. Now on the reference work of Job 38, it says thunder is called in Hebrew kolath, or voices, for it is considered the voice of God. So here we have thunder, which is called in Hebrew kolath, or voices, for it is considered the voice of God. Let's go to the next one. Okay, there it is again. We're just saying the thunder is voices, it's considered the voice of God. Next one. Now, here in Job 38, we will go to the top one first. In Job 38:1, in the footnote, it talks about the storm. It says the storm, the clouds, are God's tent. And let's see, it's gathered as the thunder, the voice of Yahweh. Now, if you can zoom in on that a little bit, we can see that clearer right there. So we see that God's tent are gathered as the thunder, which is the voice of Yahweh, roars. They descend and God shoots his arrows of his lightning. So we're talking about Yahweh, the God of the Old Testament, with his thunder and his arrows of lightning. And then beneath it we'll see on the bottom, in Hebrew it says God thunders wonderfully. We can see the bottom line, can we? God thunders wonderfully. Can we see the bottom line? Yes. God thunders wonderfully with his voice. Okay, let's go on. So now we see that thunder and lightning is connected to the old volcano god, the god of the volcano. The next slide. Here we have, and we can zoom in on a little bit on the bottom, we can see that at Mount Sinai, Jehovah performed signs, the mountain trembled and smoked all over. Millions now heard in proof that what Moses had been made known in God's name was actually the Word of God. Now if we'll back off, you can see that the Israelites are at Mount Sinai, and if you'll back off, you'll see that that is Mount Sinai is pictured here in the biblical text as a volcano. The next slide. Now here we have Jehovah. Let's go in and get that a little bit closer. So we can see that Jehovah led the sons of Israel to the mountain named Sinai, and there he gave them his law. Now look at the mountain, and you will see the mountain at Sinai, where the Israelites encounter Yahweh, Jehovah, is actually the volcano. Now let's go again to the next one. Okay. Now there we have the in the reference work of the Hebrew holidays, we have Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and the next slide. The next one we will see is another set of holidays with the Passover. And now on the bottom, we will see that, let's bring it in and a little bit closer on the bottom, and we'll see one of the holidays is the Feast of the Giving of the Law. So here's when Moses was given the law from Mount Sinai. Now let's go to the next slide, and I think we'll have a better picture of that. Okay, we'll back off a little bit. There it is. Now we're seeing that this is the Feast of the Giving of the Law, which coincides with the Feast of the First Fruits. Let's go to the next picture, which will bring that picture up a little closer, I think. And there we see the volcano again at Mount Sinai. So we're seeing that Yahweh, one of the different gods, one of the many gods of the Old Testament, was pictured here as the volcano god. All right, now we go to part 2, which is the closing part of this section of, let's go to the next slide. We will see here now the, let's see, okay, now you'll see here on the Torah and you'll see the benediction symbol. Now let's go to the next one. This is the rabbinical benediction symbol. That's the blessing symbol that the rabbis bless the congregation. Next one. Okay, now we see the high priest of Israel blessing, and you'll see the hands raised in the priestly blessing for Yahweh, the volcano god, or Vulcan. Okay, we'll go to the next picture there again in the synagogue in Los Angeles. Let's go to the next picture. I think we got a better one, and you will see. There we go. We have the prophet giving the benediction symbol. One more now. Let's go to the next one. All right, there is the, move in on that if we can a little bit, and you'll see the hands a bit. The Pentateuch scroll crown with hands raised in the priestly blessing. So we see this is a priestly blessing in the Hebrew. All right, and that, we'll go on one more. Let's go to the next one. Here is the rabbi giving the priestly blessing for Yahweh at the synagogue. And one more, which is the last picture, will be explaining why Mr. Spock gives the priestly blessing. The next picture, the priestly blessing, and that's why Mr. Spock is called a Vulcan. That was the whole idea of the Vulcan, comes from Vulcanus, or the old Cretan deity, which was later to be found in the Old Testament under the name of Yahweh. And that ends the slide presentation. So the point I'm making is that when we find the foundations for our religious movements in America and in Europe, and then we find that from those foundations of the religious movements, we have our political movements. And so therefore, what we need to do is understand that our religions and our politics are both one and the same. And if we're under the law and have to be a nation under law, the law is, of course, the law from the old Cretan volcano god Vulcanus, the Vulcan. So I'm saying, as I said, there are two kinds of facts in theology. There's the kind you look up and the kind you make up. And all I'm saying is that there's been a lot of theology that has been given to us But people need to do their homework, because so much that we've been given which is holy comes to find out when you do your homework is not that holy.